For Nnamdi, the weeks following the Sunday of the prophecy were a descent into a private Gethsemane. The stately architect, usually so sure of her blueprints and her God, found herself wandering the corridors of her father's mansion like a ghost. If a bird flies too fast, it may pass its nest, her grandmother used to say. Had she flown too far into her career that she had missed God's signal? She began a 21-day fast, drinking only water and bitter herbs to keep her mind sharp. She spent her nights prostrate on the cold marble of her private chapel. Lord, she whispered, her voice rasping, why would the creator of the universe pair a daughter of light with a man whose eyes hold the flickering shadows of a forest fire? She trusted Pastor Jeremiah, he had baptized her, mentored her. The thought that he could lie was a jagged stone in her shoe, painful, unthinkable. Chief Nnamdi was not sleeping either. He paced the veranda, his mahogany staff striking the floor with a rhythmic thud-thud-thud. He was a man of the law, but he feared the law of heaven. Beatrice, he said to his wife one evening, an old man does not sit in the house and watch a goat give birth on its tether. If this is truly God's word, our resistance is sin. But if it is a man's greed, our silence is a crime. Professor Beatrice looked up from her research papers. Justice is a slow-moving stream, Nnamdi, but it eventually smooths the roughest stones. We will not fight the prophecy with noise. We will fight it with a test. They leaned in close, their voices dropping to a conspiratorial hum. The plan was hatched, they would offer Akanni the one thing a liar cannot handle, the truth of his own reflection. Meanwhile, the sanctuary of grace was becoming a prison for Pastor Jeremiah. Akanni no longer asked for meetings, he barged into the vestry. He once slammed a jagged piece of unpolished sapphire onto the pastor's Bible. The men I owe are not as patient as the God you preach, Akanni hissed. If Nnamdi does not say, I do, by the next new moon, I will tell the elders about the empty safe and the aluminum briefcase. I will burn this temple to the ground with your reputation inside it. Jeremiah was a broken man. He tried to flee to a retreat center in the mountains, but Akanni's elders, hired thugs in cheap suits, blocked his car at the gate. Desperate, the pastor visited the Nnamdi estate 3 times a week. He wept, he quoted obscure scriptures, he swore by his ancestors that Nnamdi's refusal was bringing a curse upon the land. He regretted the day he met Akanni, but as the proverb goes, he who swallows a pestle must stand upright for a long time. 6 months passed. The Nnamdi family vanished from public view. Omoluabi turned into a cauldron of rumors. In the marketplace, women whispered that Nnamdi was pregnant for a spirit. At the palm wine shacks, men joked that Chief Nnamdi had lost his mind and was worshipping a python. The most ridiculous story claimed that Akanni was actually a long-lost prince of a sunken kingdom come to reclaim his bride. Then, one Tuesday morning, Chief Nnamdi appeared at the pastor's office. He looked tired but resigned. Pastor, the chief said, we have prayed. We will heed the word. Let the boy come. Let them court. If it is God's will, let the wedding bells ring. Pastor Jeremiah nearly collapsed with relief. He broke into a clumsy joyful dance, his clerical collar flapping. Justice. Truly, the Lord subdues the stubborn, he cried, accidentally knocking over his communion wine. It was the first time he had smiled in months, a frantic, shaky smile that didn't reach his haunted eyes. Akanni was ecstatic. He bought a new fleet of cars and began an aggressive campaign to win Nnamdi. He sent 1,000 long-stemmed roses to her office. He hired a private chef to cook her favorite Milanese dishes. He even began attending morning prayers, sitting in the front row, looking like a saint carved from ivory. With the chief's public blessing, Akanni felt invincible. He moved through Omoluabi with the swagger of a prince regent, convinced that his gemstone of a bride was finally within his grasp. However, a hunter who celebrates before the trap is sprung often becomes the prey. Nnamdi played her part to perfection. She sat with him in the garden, listening to his tall tales of gemstone mining in the north. She was cool, collected, and seemingly submissive. Akanni thought he had won. He was so busy admiring the Nnamdi family crest that he didn't notice the silent-suited men Ifuenenu's father had hired, men who didn't carry mahogany staffs, but high-speed cameras and forensic ledgers. While the trap was being set at the lounge, Ifuenenu played her role with agonizing precision. She allowed Akanni to take her to dinner, though she insisted on a public place. She accepted his lavish gifts, gold watches and Italian shoes, but she never wore them, placing them instead in a trunk marked evidence. When Akanni would try to take her hand or speak of their destiny, she would offer a distant, saintly smile. "We must wait for the traditional rites, Akanni. Let us not rush what God has supposedly ordained." Her coolness only drove him to try harder. He mistook her principled distance for the shy submission of a traditional bride. He was so blinded by his own overpleasing tactics, hiring troops to serenade her at her office and donating large sums to the church in her name, that he never realized he was courting a woman who was simultaneously signing his arrest warrant. During the weeks of courtship, a newcomer arrived in town, a man named Babatunde, who claimed to be a wealthy cocoa exporter looking to invest in the local real estate. He stayed at the town's only luxury inn and spent his evenings at the high-end lounge where Akanni often went to flaunt his newfound status. Babatunde was charismatic, a man's man who laughed loudly and ordered the most expensive cognac for the house. Akanni, hungry for an audience that didn't know his lowly origins, was drawn to Babatunde like a moth to a flame. He saw in the newcomer a peer, another man of wealth and hustle. They became fast friends, spending long nights under the amber glow of the lounge lights. One rainy evening, fueled by 3 bottles of aged whiskey and the arrogance of a man who thought his tracks were buried, Akanni's guard dropped. He began to brag about his adventures in the north. "You see this scar on my palm, Nnamdi?" Akanni chuckled, his voice thick with drink. "A boy in Jos thought he could outrun me with a blue fire sapphire. He found out the hard way that the earth only gives up its treasures to those who aren't afraid to draw blood." He leaned in closer, whispering of phantom shipments and how he had once outmaneuvered a regional commander by using a man of God as a shield. He laughed about the prophecy of the church, calling it his greatest masterpiece of theater. He didn't notice Babatunde's hand subtly shifting in his pocket, ensuring the high-fidelity digital recorder was still running. Babatunde was not a cocoa exporter. He was Inspector Adeyemi, a deep-cover operative hired by Chief Nnamdi's private security firm. Every boast, every admission of violence, and every laugh at Ifuenenu's expense was being transmitted directly to a surveillance van parked 2 blocks away, where Professor Beatrice sat with a pair of headphones, her face a mask of cold fury. While Akanni thought he was making a powerful ally, he was actually handing over the rope for his own hanging. As the proverb says, the mouth that eats the forbidden fruit is the same mouth that tells the secret. The morning of the ceremony, Omoluobi didn't just wake up, it exploded into a choreographed riot of color and sound. Professor Beatrice had spared no expense, turning the Nnamdi estate into a floral fortress of white lilies and deep crimson hibiscus. The air thick with the scent of roasting goat, expensive wood smoke, and the heavy perfume of the town's elite. Akanni arrived not like a groom, but like a Caesar. He had commissioned an outfit designed to scream old money to mask his no money. He wore an electric blue silk osoke border, so heavily embroidered with gold thread that it shimmered like liquid sunlight. His cap, a matching feeler, was tilted at an arrogant power angle. Around his neck, he wore a massive gold chain, a gaudy contrast to the elegant, understated coral beads of the Nnamdi lineage. He rode in the back of a vintage white Mercedes-Benz, flanked by his elders, the same hired actors from the city, now trembling in expensive lace that they didn't know how to wear. Akanni stepped out, throwing handfuls of crisp notes into the air, laughing as the local children scrambled at his feet. "Today," he whispered to his reflection in the car window, "I become a ghost. No one will ever find the man with the scar again. He presented the bride price with a flourish that bordered on the theatrical. Instead of the requested tubers, he brought a literal truckload. He presented a gold-plated chest containing European jewels, which were actually high-quality fakes, and doubled the traditional bags of salt and jars of honey. For the daughter of a justice, he announced to the cheering crowd, only a king's ransom will do. The drums reached a deafening crescendo. The Oja flute wailed a high-piercing melody that signaled the bride's arrival. The crowd rose to their feet, necks craned toward the grand mahogany doors of the mansion. The traditional dancers, their bodies painted with white chalk and their ankles heavy with brass bells, began a frantic celebratory stomp. The jewel of Omaluabi approaches, the town crier bellowed. The heavy iron gates of the estate suddenly groaned. But they weren't opening for a procession of bridesmaids. A screech of tires tore through the drumming. 3 black armored SUVs swerved into the courtyard, blocking Akanni's exit. The music died mid-note, leaving a ringing hollow silence. The regional police commander, a man with a face like weathered granite, stepped out. Behind him, 20 officers in full tactical gear, their rifles held at low ready, fanned out across the floral carpets. Akanni Olatunji, the commander's voice boomed, echoing off the high veranda. Also known as the Fixer, the Blue Fire Ghost, and the Man with the Scar. Your theater ends today. Akanni froze, his hand halfway to his gold chain. He looked toward the high table, expecting Chief Nnamdi to intervene. Instead, he saw the chief stand up slowly. The mountain of a man didn't look angry, he looked disgusted. He leaned on his mahogany staff and nodded to the commander. The law of the land, the chief said, his voice like rolling thunder, does not bow to the lies of a predator. The chaos intensified when 2 officers marched toward the guest of honor seating. They grabbed Pastor Jeremiah by his purple silk sleeves. What is this? This is a sacrilege. Jeremiah shrieked, his voice cracking into a high-pitched wail. I am the oracle. You cannot touch the Lord's anointed. The Lord's anointed doesn't take 20 million naira to forge a prophecy, the commander retorted, holding up a transparent evidence bag. Inside was the aluminum briefcase Akanni had slid across the desk months ago, now dusted for fingerprints. And he certainly doesn't help a murderer hide his identity. The townspeople shrieked in horror. Akanni tried to bolt toward the back gardens, but he ran straight into Babatunde, the cocoa exporter. Babatunde didn't smile. He caught Akanni by the throat and pinned him against a pillar of the mansion. The whiskey was good, Akanni, the undercover inspector whispered, but the confession on the recording was better. As the handcuffs clicked shut over Akanni's scarred palm, Ifeanyi finally appeared on the balcony. She wasn't in a wedding gown. She wore her sharp burgundy corporate suit, her intelligent gaze piercing through the chaos below. She didn't say a word. She simply watched as the man who tried to covet her name was dragged through the dirt of the driveway, his blue silk border tearing on the gravel. While pretending to accept the marriage, the Nnamdi family had used the courtship as a distraction. Their private investigators had tracked Akanni's scar to a bloody deal in the north and found the real elders he had swindled. More importantly, they had planted a digital bug in the pastor's office. They had recorded every threat, every mention of the briefcase, and every cent laundered through the church's building fund. In the end, Akanni was sentenced to 30 years. Pastor Jeremiah, stripped of his title and his dignity, was sent to prison for 10. The sanctuary of grace was closed for a year of cleansing. The story of the Nnamdi family teaches us that a lie has many versions, but the truth has only one. We must never let our fear of disobeying God blind us to the character of men. True prophecy aligns with the fruit of the Spirit, not the greed of the pocket. Ifeanyi returned to her blueprints, taller and wiser than before. She had learned that sometimes, the greatest act of faith is not saying yes to a leader, but saying no to a lie. The eye that will last to see the evening must not be reddened by the morning sun. Like and subscribe.